Welcome back. The National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure has briefed the media on safety and security measures in place ahead of Monday's planned national shutdown. Let's get some reaction from David Bruce, who is an independent researcher with the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce, for your time. So I think what a lot of people are asking or wondering at this stage is, given the size of our country, the fact that the police or the Nat Joints cluster at this stage cannot pinpoint where the likely hotspots or concentrations of this protest are going to be. Is that worrying for you?
Okay, I must say that I didn't understand it in that way. I would expect that the police do have a lot of information about, locations where it is likely that there will be protest. At the same time, the organizers of the protest, the EFF, have, they have notified the police and the public at large that they are organizing what they're describing as a national shutdown. But they've left it actually entirely open as to where this is going to take place. And what they're doing is relying to a significant degree on spontaneous engagement by their supporters. So right at this point, I have a sense that the EFF themselves don't know exactly how this thing will unfold. And so there is a major element of unpredictability about, where exactly, while I feel for instance, I would believe that the police do have some knowledge of likely locations where a lot of the protest action will take place. There are likely to be other locations where protest might emerge relatively spontaneously, and so I think they're dealing with the situation as one in which they need to be potentially able to respond to it in situations where they weren't expecting the protest to take place.
Given, I think, the fact that most South Africans have experienced at one point or another the constraints the police have with resources, we know they have put additional capacity out there to make sure that they're able to deal with any situations that arise. But one worries that given the unpredictability of the protest that you've just explained to us, that they'll be able to react quickly enough if we see significant flare-ups or specific activity in a place where they had not necessarily predicted it, and perhaps where, as you say, spontaneous engagement by their members with community members has given rise to volatility, as it were. What do you think the police's capacity is, especially in terms of public policing, public order policing, to deal with any violence that may arise?
Right. Well, that's a good question. There are something in the region of about 50 or 54 public order policing units in the country, distributed across the provinces. Potentially, this is likely to be something that takes place at a larger number of locations. Then it will be within the capacity of the public order policing units themselves to respond to. One thing that's also worth noting is that the public order training is not restricted to public order policing units. So there is some capacity or understanding about how to respond to public order situations more broadly within the police. However, I think what we need to, take very seriously is that the organizers of the protests are calling on their supporters to conduct themselves in a peaceful manner. And so I would expect that there will be flare-ups of some kind, that there will be violence in some places. But I very much hope that those locations will be, at very best, a limited, number of locations that those will take place.
So we hear I completely hear you that the organisers have said they're not encouraging their members to be violent. They're calling on them to be lawful, to be peaceful during this protest. However, from their mouths, they have termed it a shutdown. And without massive impact or significant impact, the whole day will have been a waste. We know that historically in South Africa, these kind of marches are only really impactful when protesters do, to some degree, barricade roads, prevent people from going about their daily business. Otherwise, what would the real impact be? With those activities being illegal, the police in that Nat Joint's briefing saying very clearly that any barricading of a road, any intimidation of any person, company, business, service going about their business is illegal. How are the police going to focus on the kinds of situations that they act on? Right.
Well, it's a very good question, and I think what we need to, I think that the police have, gone out of their way to try and send a message, quite a clear message, which is orientated to discouraging people from particularly engaging in forms of violence or criminality, but also they're trying to discourage, people from disrupting other members of the public from engaging in their normal activities, whether it's going to work or whatever that might be. But I think that we also need to just emphasize the distinction between disruption and violence. And so I don't think we should equate the two things. And I think, insofar as we are looking to the police to minimize the potential for this type of event to have seriously destructive outcomes, we would want them to go out of their way to minimize the risk of or the potential for violence. And so I think, we need to be a bit more kind of pragmatic, if I can call it that, about the possibility of disruption. I think, for instance, the EFF have, for instance, emphasized the fact that they regard it as important that essential services should not be disrupted. But I think you're correct in saying that there is some kind of a hope or expectation that in some ways the country will be brought to a standstill. But, so I think that nevertheless, insofar as, there is an element of disruption, potentially we can see that as something that to some degree we need to tolerate as a country as being a part and parcel of peaceful protest. But what we should be particularly concerned about and want to hold the protest organizers firmly responsible for is ensuring that there is no violence of any kind that is associated with the protest. And I think what we need to recognize there is also that there is a risk that heavy-handed action by the police can escalate the potential for violence. So we want the police to avoid unnecessarily heavy-handed action as well.
Thank you so much for those insights. That was David Bruce, who's an independent researcher with the Institute for Security Studies.